another crazy week in politics, and I'm excited to talk about the developments that we've seen.
Let you talk about our first story today.
Yeah, so our first story, really fun, really close and dear to my uterus. The Equal Rights Amendment has recently failed, and for those of you who don't know, the Equal Rights Amendment was put, so essentially back in 1982, the Equal Rights Amendment was essentially put up to the states. So states could decide if men and women were equal. And naturally, only 3 states in the whole 50 states in 1982 passed it: Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia. And then once again, it was put up in Congress, and hoping that men and women would be equal in terms of the law and the rights were provided. Although, like, it's not like I'm completely unequal, but I do still get paid less than Marcel does if we had the same job. So it's I kind of hate it. And already, like, even just from less than a year ago, women have less rights now. It's like we're literally going backwards in America.
Yeah, and like Sham, I think you mentioned, we've talked a lot about this, about like how there's been, I guess, like there actually has been an erosion of rights for women with the repeal of Roe v. Wade, and we've seen how quickly like Republican legislatures have moved forth in multiple states to codify that erosion of rights. I think Florida being the most recent with its reduction of the ban on abortions after 6 weeks, which most women don't know they're pregnant by 6 weeks. But I'm kind of taking this off topic a little bit right there. But yeah, like the Equal Rights Amendment once again failed to pass because this is America. No one's equal.
And it failed with needing 9 more votes. Only 1 Republican senator voted for it. And I just don't understand what the motive behind voting against it. Like, what exactly are Republicans gaining from like not voting for it? Because this isn't even like, I just don't understand it. Can you explain it to me, Marcel? Because I'm genuinely confused.
Well, sure. I can definitely do that. So, Sham, your first mistake was assuming that men and women are equal. I mean, come on, like what can women do that a man what can women do that a man can't do?
Give birth. Sorry, there was something stuck in my throat.
I mean, yeah, but like, do we really need to be able to do that? Isn't it more important to be able to reach the top shelf and get things off of that? But
when you put it like that, I still have to disagree. Yeah.
But I, in all seriousness, I think this is much more a continued trend of like the infantile. What's the word I'm looking for? Maybe you can help me here, but infantizing might be the right word. My English is failing me right now. I probably should have looked at the word before I tried using it. But but just like treating infantilizing. That's just a weird. I don't know how you're supposed to say it, but you guys know what I'm trying to mean. But basically denying women like their own like personhood, I guess, is a easier way to say it. And we see this in like the perpetuating of culture wars here in America. Like everything they do. Okay, why do we have to keep the 5 trans kids in the state from being able to play on female sports? Well, we have to protect the women because the women can't, they need to be protected. Or, with, abortion laws, it's like, well, we have to make sure that, women are we have to take care of women's bodies for them. We can't trust that women know what's best for their own bodies. With no fault divorce, the people that are against no fault divorce, which, basically just allows people to get divorced if they feel like they don't want to be with someone anymore. well, how can, what's the woman going to do without a strong man in her life? Children need two people in the house. They need not just the mother, they also need a father, because, those fathers are so important to a stable childhood. Uh, that didn't really work out that well, but you understand what I mean.
I mean, yeah. It's more just like going back to the divorce thing, completely unrelated. Well, a little related. It's like, I mean, I do think children need both parents, but also if both parents are not working well together, then it might be doing more harm than good. And like the government doesn't, like, they are not in your house day to day. They are not picking your kids up. So it's really should just be up to you. And if you don't want to be with your husband anymore, you shouldn't have to be. But going back to the ERA, and so I think one big reason it was like not voted for was because it would provide an avenue for making abortion a constitutional right. And once again, I will say this every single day of my life. I am not pro killing babies, but I'm also not pro forcing women to have children that they don't want to have. It should just be up to people. And like, so I guess that could be a reason. And as I said earlier, only 2 Republican senators voted for it. And no surprise, they were both women. One in Alaska, Lisa Murkowski.
Lisa Murkowski.
Murkowski, there you go. I can speak English. And Suzanne Collins of Maine. ERA was initially proposed in 1923. It did not pass until 1972. And under US law, amendments to the Constitution must be ratified 3/4 or 38 of the 50 state legislators and do not require presidential approval. A US court district ruled in 2021 that the deadline came too late to count. Okay, well, if you spend damn near 100 years trying to pass a bill, that's how fast politics moves, I guess. And federal appeal court in February rejected calls from Nevada for ERA to be adopted. The Trump administration naturally argued that the ratification needed to restart, so maybe another 100 years, and me and Marcel can finally be equals in terms of the laws and rights were provided. And the Biden administration has not formally changed its position, but voiced a support for resolution on Thursday. And naturally, no resolution was passed, and we are pretty much, nothing's changed. I still need a man to help me get to the top shelf and also allow me to drive.
Yeah, well, I mean, give it a few years, and you might not even be not be allowed to drive if Republicans get their Handmaid's Tale fulfilled. But yeah, I think a lot of this is just really just people just we can't change things, we can't make things different because things are so good as they are. There's so many influential and wealthy people, and I think that's the big problem with Congress is that it is largely made up with people from that same owners class too. They're financially disincentivized for any real change to happen in this country, and if women have to suffer at it, well, you should have been born a man. Yeah. It does help. Yeah, there's no one's ever no one's ever lost a congressional seat by being a misogynist, really. No. If you think about it, I was like, man, should I make this joke? 'Cause I'm not sure if it's true, but like I really couldn't think of someone who like in Congress who had made like a bunch of misogynist statements and like there were calls for them to leave. Like,
I mean, we elected a president that just like to grab women by certain parts.
Yeah. I guess if you really do think about it, I guess if anything, we've rewarded misogyny in this country. So yeah, like if that's who you are and that's the kind of place you want to live in and that's who you want to represent people, why would you want to risk that changing?
I mean, when you put it that way. speaking of things not changing or going backwards, dictator DeSantis just got sued by a company worth almost $200 billion, aka Disney. It's been real. This lawsuit's going to be really entertaining, to put it lightly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this turns out. I feel like, so basically, Disney suing DeSantis for really retaliation for expressing its, for utilizing its First Amendment rights to express dissent, or not even dissent, but I guess dissent works, but this disagreement with the don't say gay law in Florida, as well as DeSantis's various other anti-LGBTQ statements and legislation that's been passed. I mean, I feel like this is about as clear of a First Amendment violation as you could possibly have when it comes to the state versus a mega corporation. I don't see how this doesn't go Disney's way.
For the record, I'm still on the megacorp side, just because free speech is still allowed, and like, why does it not apply? If companies can pay less taxes because there are certain institutions and whatnot, then why aren't they allowed to say what they're allowed to say? We have here this really well-written article from NPR. And so essentially, for those who don't know and those who aren't from Florida, Disney gets a special, I guess, rule or just like special development laws that essentially allow them to control, I believe this article has it, 900 million square miles or something like that. And essentially, Disney's arguing that DeSantis has hurt their business, and I would argue that it has, because Ron DeSantis's fight against Disney and such as Republicans, for example, might be less likely to visit Disney because #Disney's woke or whatever. And I think like the business has been unfairly targeted. To get back to the root of the thing, Disney, so essentially what happened was, it's 40 square miles, not 900. So excuse me, but 40 square miles is a lot of space, I would say. And so essentially, DeSantis urged Republican lawmakers to pass a bill that would strip Disney of its self-governing authority. And before the law took effect, Disney signed a deal with its ongoing board, allowing it to retain developmental rights on the 40 square miles. Essentially, it also included covenants that said Disney had final say on any alterations to the property. And then at a meeting Wednesday in Orlando, DeSantis handpicked a board, voted to invalidate that agreement. If that is literally not directly attacking an organization, I don't really know what is. What do you think, Marcella? Does it look one way or the other, or is it pretty clear one-sided?
Yeah, I definitely think I definitely think DeSantis is pretty vocally, and there's a huge public record of it being clear that Disney was specifically, picked on, chosen to be the I guess point of attack for these policies. And we talked a little bit about this last week about how this board had basically passed a law giving Disney rights, had according to the board and according to Disney's lawyers, had followed all the legalese that they had to follow and making sure this has been done, including the amount of notification that for public comment that needed to be done as well. But yeah, this lawsuit is basically, I guess, this lawsuit is basically in response to DeSantis and the Florida government being like, yeah, like, psych, we don't really care that you guys did these things legally. We're just going to say that you didn't do them legally. And I mean, ultimately, like, this is a fight DeSantis is asking for.
Yeah, I
think,
mean, what Joe Schmo politician will try to go up against one of the biggest employers in the state that they are governors of? We looked it up before the podcast started, and it was, what was it? Second?
They're second behind Publix. And if you're from Florida, you've been to Florida, you know, like, that gives you a better idea of just like how many people Disney employs. You can't throw a rock about hating a Publix in the state. But yeah, like, you know, you wouldn't see too many people asking for this fight. And I feel like if this was a fight about like workers' rights, for example, then yeah, I'd be on the side of the state. But this is basically, this is like you said, it's because it's how dare you disagree with me, is how this fight started. And you know, like, it's a dumb fight to pick. There's literally, the only upside to this fight for DeSantis was it got his name in the news, and people got to, like, people who are online too much got to be like, hey, DeSantis is taking the fight to Disney, that woke corporation. How dare they teach my kids that, like, we should care about other people? That sounds like some socialism.
And like, I think Disney said it exactly what you're saying. If this government action was patently retaliatory, patently anti-business, patently unconstitutional, and the company's asking the federal judge to declare the board's action unlawful and unenforceable. And I agree. If this was about workers' rights, or this was about Disney taking advantage of certain privileges that taking advantage of privileges that are illegal, or privileges that don't benefit the state and Disney symbiotically, then it would be a different conversation. And some of you might be asking, why does it benefit both of them? Essentially, Disney's development deal gives it the option. It essentially takes care of the land. It takes care of the roads. It takes care of the grass and everything else in that area. And for those of you who've never been to Disney and in that area, it is very, very nice, and it looks very good, and it keeps taxes low in that area. What is scary for people that live in that area is that several have said that there's concerns of new regulations and taxes that could raise their costs and make their business unprofitable. If Disney's not taking care of that land and area, then the state has to. And to do that, it's got to raise taxes on the people that live in the area. And essentially, Dictator DeSantis has talked about raising taxes and putting tolls in the district. Once again, raising costs for people that shouldn't have to burden a cost that they haven't had to since Disney's been there. They want to use it for additional development and even add a new prison. How beautiful would be the word. And the board chair member, Martin Garcia, told business owners their taxes would be going up in part to pay for the legal fees related to DeSantis' dispute with Disney. Why should businesses have to pay for that? Does that make any sense, Marcel?
No, I mean, like, so these special districts, it's not even like this is a privilege specifically cut out and Disney's the only person in the state that has this privilege. There's over 1,000 of these in the state. Another big one would be the Villages, which is like this huge sprawls across multiple counties retirement community. Honestly, like, I've been to the Villages, not a fan. But, you know, they're a special district, but, you know, those are largely DeSantis voters, so he's not going to come against them. You know, they're donors of his. He's not going to come against them. But so it's clear that this is specifically picking the fight against Disney, picking it against them for daring to speak out against government. And it's a fight that he's going to lose. There's literally no upside to the fight. No one was really asking for this. As you said, Sham, it's only going to hurt the people living in the area because, you know, it's Disney's expensive to take care of, and it shifting that huge burden off of Disney onto, you know, the local tax base. one that's, you know, really not that high. There's not a lot of people that live in that area because, well, Disney occupies it. Like it's just a shit plan, to be honest with you. And I don't see how it works out in any sort of way that makes DeSantis look good at the end of the day. And since that's the only thing he cares about, I think he's stuck between a rock and a hard place of admitting defeat or actually losing.
I mean, in response to the lawsuit,
either way he's lost.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was just saying either way he's lost.
Yeah, I mean, in response to the lawsuit, DeSantis' communication director said that basically this lawsuit is yet another unfortunate example of their hopes to undermine the will of the Florida voters and operate outside the bounds of the laws. Well, first of all, the laws gave them the opportunity to control that land and also take care of it. Secondly, I don't think these people realize Florida voters want to pay less taxes. All voters want to pay less taxes, but especially Florida voters. Florida is one of those states where you don't have to pay income tax. And so just like, why would they want to pay more taxes for land and upkeep?
Yeah. I mean, in the day, these culture wars are basically the Ouroboros, you know, the snake biting its own tail. You know, in the day, like, you know, the snake's going to be the one suffering, and, you know, the tail will still be there. I mean, I don't really know how much more I can.
No,
I don't know. Sorry.
I was going to say that's very eloquently put. The snake biting its own tail.
Thanks. I've been rewatching Full Metal Alchemist, so that's kind of why it was in my head. But yeah, like, I guess we'll just have to see how this turns out, or this shapes up. And if you guys stay tuned with us, you'll get to continue to see our reaction to it, especially since, you know, both of us being Floridians, you know, this is pretty close to the chest.
Yeah,
but it's I think it's kind of. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
I was gonna say, speaking of the snake biting its own tail, Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon got fired this week, which I think is that the snake biting its own tail. I keep saying it, but that's the perfect way to summarize what's going on.
Yeah. Tucker's out at Fox, and Don Lemon's out at CNN. It's been a big day for you know, middle-aged retired people, and people stuck in airports. But yeah. Sorry.
I was gonna say, it's kind of pretty obvious why Don Lemon was fired. He said something along the lines of women peak while they're in their 20s, while the reason behind Tucker's firing is kind of out there. We don't really know if it was the Dominion lawsuit or if it was something else. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Lemon, like, the second that, like, I guess, like, you know, the focus on Don Lemon first, because, like, the Tucker Carlson one we talk about for a bit, because, yeah, it's not really clear why he's been let go. You know, the second that Don Lemon said that thing he did the other weekend, I'm sorry, you know, it cut off a little bit for me there, but, you know, I think he probably said what it was that he said about you know, women leaving their what was it that he said again?
Women peaked in their 20s and early 30s. That was the prime. And yeah, if that's the case, goddamn, y'all better be scared, because if this is my peak, y'all aren't ready. Y'all are not ready.
But yeah, I think that kind of goes into you know, what we said previously about how, you know, America has this kind of skewed, like, too many Americans have this skewed view of, like, women and, like, women's role, and, like, really just, like, have like taken away, like, the personhood of individual women. You know, like no one would ever say that about a man. No one ever even, like, talk about a man's peak. You know, like, I mean, shit, all you have to do is look at Congress, really. But, like, you never hear that. You never hear that same sort of saying about a man just spoken with like you could tell Don Lemon thought like the women, A, he said that in front of women, and B, he was surprised that like they didn't agree with him. And I think that tells you all about like the kind of people that Don Lemon surrounds himself with. And like when you kind of get to that level like of income or success or influence, you kind of become not disillusioned, but like you lack perspective, you lose your perspective on reality, I guess is a good way to phrase it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I think most of the women that he was on the show with were all in their like they were older than their 20s, I think. They think they were in their 30s, 40s, potentially older. I'm not exactly sure. And so like going to Tucker's firing, they don't really know. Nobody has made a comment as to why he was fired. It came specifically from Rupert Murdoch, the chairman of Fox Corp, along with his son, Lachlan, the company's CEO, and Suzanne Scott, CEO of Fox News Media. As a spokesperson for Fox News Channel declined for comment of the Fox's parent company, has been under intense amounts of scrutiny due to the now settled defamation lawsuit against Dominion. And we talked about this last week, where Fox agreed to pay $787 million for it. And some are saying that that's why he was fired. I think part of the reason he was fired is because he is kind of like, he presents an extreme viewpoint. Advertising is down. We're going into potentially a recession. And so Fox had to cut some costs. And although Tucker Carlson has the largest viewership, I don't think he like provided that much value to the company, because even if there's viewers, the company still needs to make money. And how do they make money? Ads. Marcel has his own idea as to why he was fired. What do you think is the reason?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it might just be like a lot of different reasons, like, I mean, Tucker's a bit of a dick. This isn't the first time he's been fired. He's been fired. He's fired from CNN. He got fired from MSNBC. So all three big cable news channels have fired Tucker Carlson. They say if every room you go into, you find yourself surrounded by assholes, you might actually be the asshole. But I mean, like, he's been, supposedly he's like, in addition to like, I mean, we all know about like the denying the results of the election thing, but that's not anything, specific to Tucker. There are certainly people who are much more on top of that than he was. Supposedly he called the head of Fox News, I think Suzanne Scott is what you said her name was. Supposedly he called her the C word, and you guys know which C word I mean. There's only really one C word.
It's not cupcake, by the way, for those of you who are hungry. It's not cupcake.
No, I was hoping that it was a cupcake, but I honestly, it'd be kind of funny to see Tucker Carlson call someone cupcake. I actually, never mind, ignore that. Just imagine it. Creepiest thing I've ever.
That might be a quick sexual harassment lawsuit just waiting to happen.
Well, I mean, Fox News is used to those kind of things. But
that's true too.
Yeah, so toxic work environment, insulting the CEO of Fox News, so his boss. But there's also some stuff, and I don't think this one's true at all, but someone reported that like Rupert Murdoch has seen a 60 Minutes interview with Ray Epps. Ray Epps being the guy who went to January 6th, and all of like the right-wing conspiracy people online have been accusing him of being an Asian provocateur by the FBI, despite him being on evidence telling people to not go into the Capitol. It seems like that's a bad job of provoking people by telling them to not do the thing that you're trying to provoke them into doing. But I don't think it's true. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think we might find out why he was actually fired. But like, considering it came from Rupert Murdoch, I can't imagine Rupert Murdoch cares that much about the election integrity things, because unless he thinks that, you know, it's just the biggest head that he can chop off of and not care about. But, you know, Tucker's not the only person that was doing that. I really don't think he cares about the Ray Epps thing. And, you know, considering the history of Fox News, like, Rupert Murdoch really hasn't shown that he cares about like harassment, sexual, otherwise, at that company. So yeah, I guess we don't really know. And, you know, Tucker hasn't told us either. So
I hope he does a tell-all interview talking about his experience. I want to see Tucker whine. I want to see him upset about himself, because I think when he's personally attacked, you'll see the sensitive side of Tucker.
Well, he actually did put out a video. Like, he did respond to it.
Oh.
Yeah, you know, he just didn't like actually address the thing that people wanted him to address, you know. Yeah, he said, when you take time off, you realize how unbelievably stupid the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember we had them. Trust me, as someone who participated. Like, that's what I mean. Like, he didn't actually.
So that was just a salty fuck you to his bosses.
And yeah, basically. Yeah, so like, he never really addressed it. But I mean, we'll see what happens. I think Fox won't really, like, after a while, like, you know, people will say they're leaving Fox News, like, they'll talk about boycotting it, but they'll come right back. They always do. You know, we're going to boycott when Megyn Kelly, Megyn Kelly left, Fox News is still there. Bill O'Reilly left, Fox News is still there. Like, these, you know, I'm not saying Tucker won't be able to go off and do like a podcast or be on Rumble or whatever, but like, his audience is still going to tune into Fox News.
Yeah, but I also think he's got himself a good business opportunity of potentially having his own podcast and making way more money off of that. Or, you know, it'd be more entertaining would be to see Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson at it. That would be fun and hilarious.
Well, you know, a couple things actually kind of just popped in my head. You know, Tucker Carlson, like, is, you know, Swanson Foods?
No. Well, actually, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
That's the family Tucker comes from. He doesn't really need the money. He's never needed the money.
Are you serious? I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tucker comes from money. Like, he's good.
Well, no wonder. So he's just a nepo baby.
They all are. And Don Lemon actually might have a promising career at Wingstop. Rick Ross offered him. You heard about that? Okay. Yeah.
Rick Ross offered him. You can tell the story. You tell it better than me.
I mean, Rick Ross is pretty straightforward. Rick Ross offered Don Lemon a job. Rick Ross, if you didn't know, owns a lot of Wingstop companies, or franchises rather. Also, you know, was successfully, I don't know what you call it when the Department of Labor comes after you, but the Department of Labor successfully came after Rick Ross's Wingstop franchise for failing to pay his employees minimum wage. You know, so yeah, assholes all around.
And with that, we are going to be back with the second part of our show. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Bye.
Hey everybody, we're back. You know, just had to take a quick break because, well, we don't pay for Zoom Premium or whatever they call it. Next thing we're gonna talk about, and we're coming back to Florida. And to be honest, we're gonna be talking a lot about Florida, both of us being from Florida. But you know, recently the Florida Senate passed a gender affirming care ban. It's being called one of the most extreme bans in the country, which is, I mean, it's kind of hard to say when all this shit is extreme. But basically, this bill would penalize providers of gender affirming care by inflicting criminal penalties, including felonies, on those providers. It would take away licenses from the providers. It would prohibit Medicare from covering gender affirming care for transgender youth and adults. It also forbid public funds, including those of public universities, hospitals, city or county, and Medicare from being used to provide benefits that include gender affirming care for, again, children and adults. And it will also allow the state to remove trans children from their parents if they are receiving transition care.
Sorry.
It's fine, it is. And they'll do this by giving the family court's jurisdiction to set aside all its other custody determination for a young person if their parents have authorized or might authorize best practice, age appropriate, gender affirming health care. So yeah, knowing Florida, this will almost certainly become law. And Sham, as you so eloquently put, fascist. I mean, that's all you can really say about these bands, are that they're incredibly fascist in nature. And like, not to go all Godwin's law and start comparing things to Nazis, but the first people the Nazis came for were trans people. Weimar Republic, one of the most progressive societies at the time. You could be openly gay, you could be trans. Some of the first actual medical, for lack of a better phrase, research into trans people and into transition care happened in Germany prior to the Nazis taking over. And when the Nazis were burning book, what were they burning? All that medical information about trans people.
That's just like, it's just kind of an attack on people that have the least advantages. And it's really scary to see. And what really grinds my gears even more is the fact that Republicans are always like, we want less government involvement. We want less government involvement. Well, now the government's getting involved in taking away children from their parents. And like, what happens to a child's health should not involve the government. Like, if the child needs gender affirming care, or if they don't, or if the parents think it's best if they wait, or whatever, that decision is between the child and the parent and the doctor, not involving the government. I think you said this to me like before we recorded this, something along the lines of like, when Obamacare or Medicaid was getting passed, Republicans were, what did they say exactly? You put it way better than I'm about to say.
I mean, this is almost a direct quote of what people were saying at the time. It's they were basically saying that this is the government getting between me and my doctor.
Well, this isn't like the most blatant example of the government getting between not you, but people's doctors and them and their choices and their private lives. And I don't know what else is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly hypocritical, but also incredibly dangerous as well. Because like when it comes to trans people or people who are suffering, for lack of a better phrase, suffering from gender dysphoria, like gender affirming care is the official medical, like, advised practice, whatever you want to call it. Like, this is the government saying, hey, we see that doctor, I mean, and well, this is the government coming in and just trying to not, like, it's basically going beyond its role and directly trying to, you know, formulate how medicine works, you know, like, just like with, like, and we see this all the time. It's like doctors say A, well, government says, well, we believe like our holy sky being thinks that B is what we should be doing. So in pursuit of the freedom of our religion, we're going to force all this on the rest of you.
And how is that? I mean, I think it's an erosion on secularism as a whole in general. And it's just honestly a huge travesty what's being done to people in the LGBTQ community, to women, to transgender individuals. And like, it's the government putting their mouth where it shouldn't be. Like, it's like, you know, for a lack of a better word.
Yeah. And like, I'm probably gonna go a little bit far in saying this, but I kind of don't feel that way. But like, this is starting to meet. I mean, this really is meeting like all this usual signs you start seeing of genocide. And I'm not saying we're gonna start killing trans people. I'm not saying that
I
we're not,
hope
but I'm
not.
not. Yeah, but like when you look at like how genocides operate, right? You know, you you start classifying like it's us as us and them. You start discriminating against people. You start dehumanizing them. Then it starts becoming organized. And then you start passing laws to codify that discrimination, that dehumanization. That's literally how it always starts. And
Limiting
I
what
mean,
books people can read, and that's already been done in Florida. Limiting like what knowledge is available, burning books. Like, we're just on a very clear path to fascism, and it's very scary, and I just worry.
absolutely, yeah. And like it's usually attributed to like Upton Sinclair, but like as far as I can tell, we don't know who originally said it. But fascism's not going to come is going to come to America, and it is coming to America draped in the cross, or sorry, draped in the flag, carrying a Bible. And so many Christians in this country, and not enough people are, especially not enough Christians are standing up and saying, like, repudiating this. But so many Christians are, pursuing like mistake religious freedom with their freedom to basically impose their religion on the rest of us. And like, it's I don't like living in a society like that. I've been finding this incredibly suffocating, and I know, and I'm not even trans, and I can't imagine what it's like being trans and living in this state. And just to see constant attack and dehumanizing of you yourself as a person.
Yeah, it's horrific. And like, the worst part about it is like, it's kind of just spreading like wildfire, because like these anti-trans bills are going into place in Florida, and like, we're not really going to talk about this topic, but like the whole state representative who was banned from the Montana state floor, like she's not allowed to, she's literally banned for the rest of the year. And I think it's just like, when is it going to be like, when are people going to start saying that like these things that were promised we're not actually getting? And like, Republicans promise freedom and all this other good shit supposedly, and it's not. It's like freedom for specific people. Like, I get it. Like, you as a Christian don't want your 16-year-old daughter to get an abortion. I understand that, but that doesn't mean somebody else should be forced to have a kid because you don't want that. It's
Yeah.
I could keep going on and on about this, and I think like we need to move on to our last topic of the day, that being the Supreme Court. And like,
well, Sham, real quickly, before we move on, I just want to, because I do care about this issue a lot, and I just wanted to mention, like, just to make sure people understand like how severe a problem this is. And so currently, according to the Human Rights Campaign, there are, and this is a little bit old, this is from February, there are currently 340 anti-LGBTQ plus bills at the state level in this country. 150 target trans people. Trans people are about 0.1 to 0.2% of the population. Like, that's like, I mean, there's a lot we could say about that, but that's the amount of effort. That's the amount of like.
That's almost 6 bills a state.
Yeah, like, it's a ridiculous amount of effort to try to, even if you're approaching this from I guess a non negative point of view, like you were thinking you were actually doing what's best. That's an insane amount of legislation for such a small amount of the population. But B, like it always starts with the smallest minority they can get away with. Like this is a genocide. Republicans have called for eradication of trans people. You know, there are people on Twitter, prominent people. It's a big issue. Like I love mixed martial arts. Fighters are incredibly anti-trans and they have big audiences. And, you know, Jake Shields, former Strikeforce welterweight champion, fought George St. Pierre for the for the UFC welterweight title. Is a pretty big mouthpiece for these kind of things. Like this, there are people who are in positions of power, in the ears of people of positions of powers who want to eradicate trans people, lock up people who help them. And this bill in Florida is another step in that direction.
Yeah, no, not the right direction. For the record, we don't think
no,
that's
sorry.
Right.
Yeah, that was a bit of a slip. Just, you know, usually when you say the word in the blank direction, you have right there, but yeah.
Yeah. I just want to clarify for everyone.
Yes.
Supreme Court. Speaking of oversight of the government and too much power, the Supreme Court is getting a little frisky, as I like to say it. We've had two separate Supreme Court justices come into problems with ethics in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We've had Thomas and Gorsuch. Marcel, why don't you break down this issue for us?
Yeah, so you know, last episode we talked a little bit about Clarence Thomas's issues with his maybe not be Nazi best friend. So Thomas, and I don't remember if we talked about this last time where we talked about Thomas, but Thomas had some odd dealings with this fellow, where this guy whose name I can't even remember, but it'll come to me here in a second. But Harlan Crow. There we go, Harlan Crow. But had some dealings with Harlan Crow where he sold Harlan some property, and Harlan's been letting Thomas's mother stay rent-free on this property. On top of that, Thomas has been taking these elaborate free vacations with Crow for years, if not decades now, and has not been reporting any of this stuff, which is an incredible ethics violation. Like all government officials are required to report, you know, gifts, so to speak. You know, not sure how far it goes, but I know certainly congressional aides or, you know, people who barely get paid minimum wage have to report gifts as well. So he has some reporting gifts. Then on top of that, it came out that Neil Gorsuch is also in a little bit of a pickle too. A CEO of a prominent law firm who has had multiple cases in front of the Supreme Court has purchased property from Justice Gorsuch as well. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear what the issue with that is, where you have like this just this free-flowing exchange of like good and services and money, and how messy that can get when all of a sudden that person is sitting in front of you, and you're a member of the highest court of land, and you don't answer to anybody really. Like, if we're being honest, Sham, who does the Supreme Court answer to? Their lifetime appointments.
No, nobody. Exactly. That's the issue. And like what's recently happened is I believe it was Corbyn. He's a Democrat, and
Durbin, I think.
Durbin. I'm not Corbyn. Dick Durbin. He's a Democrat from Illinois, District 11. He recently put up a formal code of conduct for the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, all nine of them have essentially come out with a joint statement saying that it's not necessary. And their whole argument is that they already meet with other ethics persons and whatnot. And every single person in the federal government like there is a third party ethics committee for people in every federal judge has one. So why wouldn't the highest court of the land have one? That's, other than some sketchy ass shit going on, I can't really think of any other reason.
Yeah, I think some sketchy shit is I think like if they're afraid that, I think this might be an issue that all the judges, because you never see the entire Supreme Court agree on anything, ever. And the one thing they agree on is like, hey, we don't really want you looking at our finances and our shit. You know, like we need this to maintain our independence. We can't have you guys checking in on us. Like to me, that says we need to be looking into what's going on in the background of our Supreme Court justices. You know, whether or not
it's a red flag if I've ever seen one.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, we know that there's all sorts of sketchy shit. We know these justices get paid to go like give talks to places and stuff like that. Like honestly, like my opinion, they shouldn't be allowed to get paid anything more than like what they get paid to be on the bench, which certainly can't be a small amount of money. But like anything beyond that basically opens them up to all sorts of potential ethics violations and having to decide between like potentially decide on where they fall on certain cases. But you know, the fact that they basically like Roberts refused to even like I guess meet with the Judicial Committee in regards to this, I guess shows that, you know, the Supreme Court doesn't just view themselves as like the law of the land. They view themselves as above the rest of us because, you know, these are our representatives. They represent the American people. And by saying that, they basically say that they don't feel beholden to the American people.
I mean, at this point, they aren't. They are beholden to themselves because there's no third party committee. There's nobody that's actually like in charge of them, in charge of the ethics behind them, or anything like that. And it's just, I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that. And I think part of it is because they have this mindset because we don't get to vote for our Supreme Court justices, right? They're appointed, and it's a lifetime appointment. So like between those two things, I think that's what allows them to think that they're above the law. But really, they're supposed to be holding up the Constitution, which is supposed to be protecting us. But I guess it all kind of makes sense why the Constitution why our constitutional rights are constantly being evaded and being like overrun and overtaken basically by whatever is most convenient for billionaires, whatever is most convenient for politicians, but not at all what's convenient for actual American people.
Yeah. Well, and you know, like there's not going to be any real repercussions for this. Like, do you know the last time a Supreme Court justice was impeached?
No, I don't.
So 1805, and he was acquitted.
Damn.
He was acquitted, Sham. So literally, like, there's never been any repercussions for a Supreme Court justice ever in the history of this country. So no wonder they feel like they can just act with impunity when it comes to, you know, not living up to the standards that like you would feel their office holds. But I mean, this is just par for the course for this country. Like it's corruption from the bottom up or from the top down.
Top down, like, bottom up, sideways, upside down, and all different types of shapes and forms. Don't matter which way you say it.
You know, yeah, you're either it's George Carlin said it best. You know, there's a big old club, and you ain't in it.
And most American peoples aren't in it. It's unfortunately true. This is something we didn't really plan to talk about, but I did want to mention it. Our boy Biden has released his official 2024 nomination, or not nomination, his bid for the nomination. Well, I guess he's going to get the nomination, right? Because he's right?
Yeah, no, he's probably going to get the nomination. And honestly, like I would have watch this video, but it's significant. It's way too long. To be honest with you, but yeah, he's certainly going to get the nomination. I think it's just Marianne Williams.
We live in a gerontocracy. It only makes sense why our president is almost 100 years old. He's
Yeah.
he's literally one of our lifetimes away from being 100 years old. Like,
Well, he's also, if he wins, he'll be the oldest person elected president ever, too. Um,
ever in
and
the United States or ever.
I think he might be the oldest person elected president, period. Um, it's either him or Reagan, but I meant in like the United States. But I'm gonna double check that right now. Oh no, yeah, he's already the oldest elected president.
Oh.
So like, yeah, so he might be the oldest person to ever be president.
So there's like no chance of like, there's no way we can get somebody younger than 50, right? There's no hope for that. As I think most people would like.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I think part of it is that like young people don't vote, which like people say that Gen Z's changed that, and certainly Gen Z's voting in higher populations than even like millennials did. But I just don't really believe much in the whole like, hey, this generation is going to save us kind of thing, because I've been hearing it for 15 years and it's gotten kind of tiring. Hearing that, and I don't think that's how things should work. Like, we need to rely on the younger people. No, like, everyone needs to go out and vote. Get off your ass. But
can we vote you in, Marcel? I'll be your campaign manager.
I know. We'll talk about it. We gotta start small. There's other things I gotta do in order to prepare something like that, to even run for anything whatsoever. And I think my only real opportunity to run for stuff would be here in Florida, locally. But I do think that'd be a possibility, if I'm being honest. But I digress. Sorry?
I said, catch me outside the voting booth.
Yeah, I mean, they did just, well, I won't speak like that, but yeah, like, I just don't see it happening. I feel like, like, if you look at how America works, it really is like a country. Like, America really is already Florida, despite DeSantis wanting to make America Florida. I mean, anyway would be the wrong way, but when it comes to economics, like, who has the majority of the wealth? Old people. Who has majority of the power? Old people. Who has majority of representation? Old people. I mean, we're seeing this repeatedly, and that's why people don't want Dianne Feinstein to resign, despite the fact that she has dementia. Currently, she's going through a pretty bad bout of shingles. She is not attending the Senate because she's going through the issue with shingles, and I don't think the dementia helps either. But like, that's them. They're that old person. They feel like, I can't push out that person, because then the young people are going to want to push me out, and I need to hold on to the seat for a little while longer, because damn it, I can't let those young, like, I mean, you see it everywhere. It's like, you see like how many people sit in a position of power forever and not ever give someone younger than them to ever get a chance to step up to it. That's basically what's happening. Like, a whole generation of people, boomers, are occupying position of power and not being allowed to take over.
What bothers me most about this is the fact that, like, all these older politicians and people in power, they're not going to be alive to see the effects of their like policies at all. They're not going to be alive to see the long-term implications, potentially the short-term, depending on their health. I'm not, God forbid anybody dies, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they're at a risk, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it, is like, like, they don't care, they'll be dead. And then, like, it's for, in the grand scheme of things, it's really for so little. Like, if you're already, I think part of it is just, the prestige too of being in Congress, or being in the Senate or whatever. But like, you think that when you're that old, you would want to retire and just like enjoy your golden years and just like do nothing. I mean, heck, I'm not anywhere near that age, and I'd rather just be doing nothing. But yeah, I think part of it's just like, there's like an addictive nature to power, like, and they don't want to. They either don't want to, or incapable of giving it up, or maybe they just don't trust people younger than them. We see that all the time with like, and so many people fall in this trap of getting to a certain age and being like, you know, these kids these days, they back in my day, things were like this. Like, it might be a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I think it
But
might
we
just,
digress.
yeah, it's probably mostly.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.